Happy New Year, and yeah, I know it's March, but time doesn't exist, and I got bullied into making a video, so welcome to the Big Flat Now. This show is brought to you by the Metaverse. That's not true. But speaking of time, what a great segue. I want to take you back to 2010 and talk about what I think is a really important moment in South African pop culture, and that is Deborah Patta pocket watching Khanyi Mbau.
Hello and welcome to Third Degree. South Africans were astounded recently at photographs taken at the parties of two social high flyers. Amongst them, pictures of sushi being served off half-naked women were splashed across the papers. It led to an outburst from Kusatu's Zwelinzima Vavi, who claimed these displays of opulence spit in the face of the poor. This week, we take a look at conspicuous consumption or bling and ask, are these the values we want our children to aspire to?
I love nice things. I love living comfortable. I loved getting anything that I want, that my heart can dream of. Obviously, you can't get everything in life, but I've always wanted that. I watched a show when I was young called The Lives of the Rich and Famous. I don't know if you remember that old show. And that I used to love seeing the big houses, big cars, butlers, and just the opulence. That
You
sort
love
of
opulence.
I love opulence.
In a country where we have such extreme inequalities, that to display wealth so ostentatiously is no different to Marie Antoinette saying, let them eat cake.
True.
Yeah.
The fact is, it's not my fault. I had choices in life and I took my choice. And I am not killing anyone. Whether you like it or not and you can't sleep at night, I am still going to do it.
I don't think anyone's saying that. I don't think anyone's saying you can't live your dream because people are starving. I don't think anyone's saying you can't get rich if that's your dream. I think what people are famous for being famous.
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't get rich.
No.
You married a rich man.
Yes. But I am not also going to sit and be afraid to live out my dreams in a public space because people are starving.
Now, I didn't actually watch Third Degree when it was airing. I was very young and I've never really liked the news. But I have always known of Deborah Patta, and she's always been framed to me as this like journalistic powerhouse. She's this like big heavy hitter, she's like Lois Lane in this bitch. Like she
Wanted to meet you because everyone fears sitting in this chair.
Yeah.
So for me it was like, wow.
I mean, you don't fear it.
No,
Absolutely
I don't.
not.
It's like climbing a mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and basically just her being this amazing like iconic fixture in the media made watching this interview kind of shocking. Or maybe shocking is not a good word for this, but I was kind of taken aback by how aggressive this exchange is, especially because this is the first thing I've ever seen from her. And as someone who's specifically not a journalist, which is a disclaimer I should start adding more often, I don't work towards being objective and neutral because I'm always right and I don't care what anyone else has to say. And it just makes it very strange to see an actual media professional basically kind of attacking a young black woman for conspicuous consumption, or like this conversation just feels very pointed and targeted in a way that I just would never have expected.
Quite frankly,
I don't want to be a
my
role
kid to
model.
be like you.
Yeah.
And without trying to condone the materialism and excess that they're discussing, I find it really telling that this white woman in South Africa, who's like 30 years older than Khanyi Mbau, by the way, is speaking about inequality and poverty and injustice as if this black woman was somehow at the cause of that, and that also she has sort of the power and influence and privilege to change that. When if that's really the case, if that's where we're coming from, then we could make the same argument for Deborah. If we take it back to like 1994, dawn of democracy, Khanyi Mbau was 9 years old, Deborah Patta was 21. Okay, and on top of that, like, she's a white woman, she's a part of the race that creates it, and she still benefits from all that inequality and poverty. And if addressing Bling culture is like a part of her activism, then like, why not speak to the Ruperts and the Oppenheimers? Why not go after the materialism and the consumption of the wealthy white people who architected apartheid and who've earned their fortunes from oppression and corruption, not just during apartheid, but in many of the years following, like white monopoly capital or whatever. Especially, I think it would have been better to that because this feature begins with an attempt to distinguish good rich people from quote-unquote bad rich people. And her examples of good rich people are your Bill Gates types. They're reserved, they're inconspicuous, they're subtle, and they all got their money in legal ways. And I don't have to mention that just because being a billionaire is legal doesn't make it ethical, but I will. And I don't know, to me, making money within a system that legalizes exploitation and enslavement is not really giving the moral example you're trying to go for. It's not in any way superior or better, and I don't understand why you would want to promote that as the better way to be rich. And even more than that, I think the idea that like wealth is somehow better or more dignified when people don't wear name brand clothing and buy expensive cars and throw lavish parties that we can see, by the way, because that's the other thing. There's a lot of wealth and money here that we can't see, but we've decided that when we can't see something, it's somehow better to appear like you just accumulate millions and millions of rands with the intention of just hoarding it. Like, they're not putting it back into the economy by going to the Gucci store or whatever. Any of their acts of philanthropy are just tax write-offs. And like, what is so moral about basically acting like a medieval dragon sitting on a pile of treasure that you won't even use? It's just hoarding wealth for the sake of hoarding it. Like, just the idea that it's just enough to accumulate money and that's it. Like, you just want to own these things. That's not any more admirable. That's not any more admirable or better than like Gucci belts and sushi parties. And you know, I'm actually inclined to argue that it's a little bit worse, but that's besides the point. I also think it's very interesting that her examples of bad rich people are a black man and a white woman. And then to go address Bling culture, to get the bottom of everything, you're going to go after a black woman. And I'm aware that Khanyi Mbau was supposed to be a part of this and he didn't join, but that doesn't change the aspects of what feels like misogynoir to me. You know, it's kind of giving like there's a personal agenda going on. There are so many elements of this sort of ridiculous moral panic, and this also kind of only worsened the sort of dog whistle aspect I'm feeling is worsened by the claim that these examples of black people flexing in the media will only drive young people to take shortcuts and not want to work.
Is it sets this kind of example that that's what they aspire to, and then people start looking for shortcuts. They want to get rich quickly. That's what it does.
Like, is there some innate part of black people's nature that is essentially lazy and conniving? Like, is that, like, what are you trying to say? Because I feel like there's a place I've heard that rhetoric before, and I think it's probably the same place that set up deliberate systems to prevent black people from attaining the wealth and fame you're now criticizing them for. It just feels a little bit familiar, you know? And the other thing that also was weird is, like, why is Paris Hilton's wealth more genuine than Kanye's just because she inherited it?
It's like a Paris Hilton effect.
Except she owns a lot of hotels.
She does.
She is genuinely wealthy.
She is genuinely wealthy because of her family.
Yeah. Isn't the whole capitalist wet dream that like success and wealth are supposed to be hard fought for and earned by anyone, anywhere, if they just believe and they work hard enough? And like, I feel like Kanye fits that. Like, she lifted herself by the bootstraps that everyone's always talking about. And that doesn't matter if you consider sugaring or sex work as legitimate, because on top of that, she also did start out with, you know, a job instead of a trust fund. And I just don't understand what is the point of wanting to speak about the American dream and the good kinds of wealth if you're not going to actually celebrate someone who against all odds made it. And especially when that is a black woman. Like, isn't that what we're sold with that whole capitalist wet dream, that like doesn't matter who you are and where you're from, that you can do it? Like, this fits into that narrative. Why are you upset? And again, I'm still not trying to, and I feel like I have to emphasize that I am not trying to condone materialism, and I'm still not a big fan of the criminal to influencer industrial complex either.
You shouldn't also now make the rich feel sorry for living large.
No. I do think you should make rich people feel sorry for living large. Excessive wealth isn't good for anyone, but I'm still interested at how morality and ethics become such a vital talking point when black women do it specifically. Because, you know what, it is objectively terrible to make money through fraud and the further entrenchment of your own people. And it's really, like, it's bloody cheeky to then also host, like, 700,000 rand birthday parties. Well, people are actually dying, Kim. But then, like, wouldn't it have been better for this feature, for this interview, this discussion, to look at it, what it is about a time of crisis and distress, and when the poverty numbers are on the rise, that makes the upper classes so decadent, you know? And I think the pandemic has really put into perspective for a lot of us that the world burning is just a bonfire for the rich. And like, let's talk about that instead. Or maybe let's talk about how in a nation built on a get-rich-quick scheme, built on a crime, we're only ever going to have a culture of crime and excess, and that Khanyi Mbau hasn't created that. You know, this didn't just begin with her. She's just embodying something that's long been a part of our way of life. And I think maybe that's actually what is the cause of like this aggressive, panicked energy that not just Deborah, Patta in this feature, but like the media has towards Khanyi Mbau, especially at this time, you know.
William Gamedi says you've come to represent Bling culture in South Africa. I mean, are you proud of that? Is that what you aspired to when you were a 4-year-old girl, to be the representative of something so crass?
I don't think it's crass, but I am not proud of it. It is something that has just
crass,
come.
Khanyi. Let's face it, it's crass. It's crass.
I think that at this time that like Deborah and the media's concern about Bling culture, which also like terrible term, is just, it's indicative of a society that's having a very difficult time reckoning with its own reflection. And I think that even with the fall of apartheid, and yeah, we can maybe argue that like things have gotten worse, I think that Deborah's anger or her shock here represents our own society's like upset and frustration that the Rainbow Nation project didn't work, and because of that, like out of a fear or something, we're looking for scapegoats. And you know, it's like a compass needle pointing north. You just blame the hot girl. It's always the hot girl's fault. And I just think that, you know, Khanyi Mbau is not a sign of the decline of the South African dream. She's not proof of society turning bad. She is just the realization of what society's always been. Like, she's not in any way invented anything. And I think it's that sort of like, there's just like that clash really upsets people. And again, I don't want to like sit here and paint Khanyi Mbau as some sort of like victim or martyr, or act like every one of her actions or any one of the people she's involved with is innocent, or that like all of this materialism is cool. And I think I have to stress that I don't want to do that, because like I'm a little bit of a stan. Like I'll say it. I'm a Khanyi Mbau fan. You know, like to me, she is South African pop culture. Like, she is our proto-celebrity. And whether or not I agree with every single thing she does, and I don't agree with every single thing she said or done, I see in her a really forward-thinking woman who's managed to package her persona in such a way that, like, she's still making headlines decades into her career. She's still getting clicks or selling newspapers if those still exist, you know? Like, there's a reason that she is on Young, Famous and African, the new Netflix show, despite being 36 years old. Though my friend Grace would argue that adolescence only ends at 35 in South Africa, and that's why our youth parties look like that. But my point is that she's done something like I don't think many other celebrities in South Africa have done, and she's just managed to be around and be relevant and still be interesting and still be a talking point, like, for years on end. And I don't think that happens with many other South African celebrities. Patta asks her, what's so special about Khanyi Mbau that people would pay her back then 35,000 rand appearance fee? And she says,
but with me is, I guess, people don't think I'm a real person.
Right.
And then when they get to sit with me and realize, okay, she's just like me, yay. And for me, that's a business that I found, and it works for me.
And like, I'm a little bit gagged, or I think it's pretty impressive that in 2010, when social media was still just Valencia filters and poking your cousins on Facebook, she already predicted like the essence of what makes the influencer business model work. Like, she already predicted the way celebrity and pop culture was going, like, probably without even knowing it. She just had an understanding of what people wanted from celebrities already. And oh damn, I just remember that this video was actually supposed to be like a pop culture specific retrospective and look at sort of the shift in how the media engages with the nouveau riche, especially when that is black women. But I feel like I've gone in a very long, weird, woke tirade, or admitted that I find Deborah Patta strange, even though I think she's kind of funny. Like, this whole interview is hilarious. So let me get back on track.
What I'm saying is, I am not trying to be a figure for girls to try and be.
But you go and give motivational talks.
I do.
About
because
what?
That you can
What
be
possibly
what
can
you
I
want
learn
to
from
be.
you?
What you could possibly learn from me is a girl with a single parent has accumulated so much. What I put out in the media is a Barbie doll effect. But
the Black woman and luxury movement. The Black woman and luxury movement has a lot of divisive, controversial, negative, interesting discourse around it. Some of it is fair, a lot of it is ridiculous. And yeah, I also think it's a little bit weird to frame like high-end retail shopping as a political movement. But at the same time, there are like 3 things left in the world that Black women can do that aren't going to be perceived or manipulated into being acts of revolution and resistance. You know, like you see with the Black women in luxury movement that there's all this questioning you'll never see applied to white women doing the same things. Like questions of like, where is their money coming from? The idea that Black women are spending money on this and they're hyper-focusing on this because they're neglecting their other duties, or they're all a bunch of prostitutes like selling us fake lifestyles, or somehow that, you know, the act of buying the Hermes and the Louis Vuitton is just somehow really counter-revolutionary, you know, like those weaves are because you hate yourselves or you're all sluts for whiteness. Somebody call Dr. Umar or whatever. And I think this Khanyi Mbau interview is just really indicative, or like a good like way to frame the way we engage with the Black women in the luxury movement. So Tamara Morrison wrote about the inherent paradox in this movement, saying, "These images of Black women embracing luxury has become a movement championed by women who live that life and those who aspire to access it. Right now, a Black woman sharing an image with a Louis Vuitton bag while sitting in an expensive car is seen as so much more than just having a fancy bag and an even fancier car. It signals to the world that Black women deserve to enjoy the finer things in life and that we can with ease." But the more we focus on the materialism of it all, are we taking away from the importance of prioritizing luxury for Black women in fields of real importance? After all, buying expensive things doesn't change the positionality of Black women as a whole. To that, if we think about how Khanyi Mbau has always been treated in the media as this Jezebel figure, and part of why her wealth ignites vitriol is because it's supposedly ill-gotten, because like somehow being a sugar baby is almost as much of a crime as state capture or being an apartheid beneficiary, right? And she's demonized as this gold digger figure for so long, especially for being with Mandla and Tembu back in the day, with very little discussion that I've ever seen in the media about how, like, she was 19 when she met that man who at that time, or I mean, I guess he still is, like 30 years older than her. And that to me is just so wild, because she gets framed as the villain out of that relationship when like there was probably some grooming that's gone on.
I mean, I was 19 and here's all of these things and he's putting them at my feet.
How does she come out of that, the villain, which speaks to Tamara Morrison's point? Like, it doesn't change your position as a Black woman to have wealth. You still are treated or judged a certain way. Her Jezebel characterization speaks to why the Black woman in luxury movement has become actually like a movement for so many Black women. I don't think many of us feel like we are allowed to enjoy wealth. Actually, we not feel like we aren't. We aren't allowed to enjoy wealth, success, and any sort of socioeconomic power, because all of the images people have of us, or like as our societal constructs make of us, have to fit into a certain narrative of us being poor, marginalized, thieving, deceitful, downtrodden. There is something to be said about how attaining luxury can feel very radical when you're doing that within a system that has set up actual institutional blockers to prevent you from doing that very thing. And that when the media and the public are wanting to take away your wealth or look down upon the thing that you as a marginalized person have never had access to for so long, it almost feels akin to someone trying to take away your freedom. In an open letter to his biggest critic, Kenny Kunene wrote, "I should not have to defend what I spend my money on, a huge milestone in my life, when it's honest money spent on honest fun." But like on the other hand, being one rich Black woman or a small group of rich Black women doesn't change the material conditions of being a Black woman, especially for Black women as a whole, which obviously isn't what I'm sort of like describing to Khanyi Mbau. I don't think she's ever said to represent all women or said she's here acting as sort of a politician, because you know they never flex on us instead of committing to real change. But the fact is, designer clothes and expensive vacations across the world aren't going to prevent femicide. They don't stop poverty. They don't aid service delivery anyway. And it's interesting that the actualization of luxury for Black women in the sort of lens is so Eurocentric and materialistic, and I think that's a very fair criticism of the movement. Like, why does this idea of freedom look so much like behaving like our oppressors? And it's just would have been, and I just wish that was the question rather, that maybe Deborah was lobbying at Khanyi, but I think also she's not really the one to do that, is she, love? Yeah. But like, I still think this interview has a lot of value, especially if we look at it from the idea of trying to understand like how and why we got to the place where we are here. The sort of anger and condemnation that Khanyi Mbau and the rest were receiving in the late 2000s, 2010s, whatever, isn't very like, it's a very stark contrast to how I feel like the mainstream media engages today with these images of the black upper class and the black elites and, you know, Bling culture. In 2010, this was vulgar, crass, and it was basically like the fall of the Roman Empire. And today, it's either an act of revolution and rebellion or like a victimless celebration of black girl magic, like take your pick. And there obviously are people who still are very opposed to flex culture. I think there's a lot of discourse about that going on right now, especially because, you know, all this flexing and blinging and social media performance is such an ingrained part of our world today. And it's just really interesting and fascinating to me to see how Khanyi Mbau captures like trends, discourse, and culture often years before they become public opinion or they become widely relevant. Or she still remains to encapsulate all those things, you know, years into her career. I think she's a really great avatar for studying pop culture in South Africa. Like, if pop culture is defined as a set of practices, beliefs, and objectives prevalent in a society at any given time, and that society's interaction with those dominant activities and ideologies, and like Khanyi Mbau is exactly that. Like, through any of her scandals, through any of her actions and stuff, you can see the ongoing conversation and changing thoughts and shifts and what have you in South Africa. Even today, I think she's still at the center of a lot of conversations about fame, our greater treatment of black women, not just in our interpersonal lives, but like as a society and in the media. When it comes to sex and scandal, what is and isn't moral, the way we see ourselves and the conflicts that arise from, you know, our reflections going against our preconceived notions of ourselves. And I think, like, to end this video, like, what if I just said that Khanyi Mbau has done more for critical thinking around gender, class, and race than Karl Marx? Is that too far? Because it doesn't matter. That's how I'm ending that video. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from y'all about what you thought about what I've said. If you've seen the Deborah, Patta, and Khanyi Mbau interview, what do you think? If you've seen the special on Bling Culture, and, you know, do you feel like we've made any progress, or we're backtracking, or like, you know, what do you think? Talk to me. Let me know. And yeah, that's it. It's like midnight right now. I want to go to bed.
Victor Lemire said the vulgar rich are on a roll, spending on obscenely expensive items as if they have no conscience.
We do have consciences. That conscience tells me to go get that car.